are at 10:02. Thank you to those of you who've been waiting patiently. My name is Ed Lebo. I'm director of the Public Art Program with the Phoenix Office of Arts and Culture, and delighted that you could join us this morning. And before we move on to introductions of Brad Goldberg, I just wanted to introduce a couple of our public art team. There's Barry Sparkman, if you could wave to folks. He's going to be running the technology here this morning and also tracking questions once we get to the end of the presentation. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, if you have questions in the course of the presentation, simply put them into the chat box. We'll collect all those at the end and then farm them out to Brad or our team, whoever they're directed to. I also wanted to introduce Elizabeth Grajales. Elizabeth is our Senior Public Art Project Manager, and Barry's also a project manager, and she'll be helping to navigate this morning's session as well. So this is, I believe, the 12th in our series of public art workshops that began in August and then ran into September. All of them are being recorded so that you can have them as a resource to look at in the months and years ahead. You can follow the link at phoenix.gov/arts and go to the workshop page, and you'll find them there, and we're loading them up as soon as we can process the videos and get them up online. But if you've missed the previous ones, those are all there for you to review. So thanks again for joining us this morning. We're delighted and lucky to have Brad Goldberg with us. Brad is a nationally renowned artist, and one of his distinctions is that he's as comfortable in creating unique sculptures as he is in designing and building large works and landscapes. And I think some of this, in having worked with him over the years, is that it reflects his dual training as an artist and as a landscape architect, but it also reflects his gift of seeing and thinking about works not as standalone objects, but connected to our broader experience of places, the places we build and the places we live in and inhabit. And Phoenix, the Phoenix Public Art Program, is fortunate to be able to work with him on two examples of these talents. In the late 1990s, Brad worked with HOK Architects, I believe, to design the shaded walkway and courtyard in front of the municipal courthouse in downtown Phoenix, and you can kind of see that on the screen behind me. All that shade and those mesquite trees, 85 in total, were part of his thinking. And more recently, he collaborated with the community of engineers, talented landscape architects, including Rick Jones, who's with us this morning from then Smith Group JJR, and a great construction team to create a new entrance for the Pueblo Grande Museum. And he'll be talking about that this morning. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that his collaborations really do begin at home. He works closely with his wife, Diana, a painter, printmaker, graphic designer, in developing all of his projects. So we're delighted to have him here this morning to be talking about his works. Before we turn it over to Brad, I wanted to just turn it over to Elizabeth Grajales and fill you in a little bit about what workshops there are up and coming and how to access those. Elizabeth, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you, Ed. We wanted to invite you for next week, October 29th, behind the scenes with Willie Smith. And then starting in November, we have Art in the Law. And November 5th, we have Basic Business Practices. And then on November 12th, we have Dealing with Conflicts. And then on the 19th, it is Online Business Setup. So we hope you sign up for those workshops. Those will be very informative. And without any further ado, I would love to introduce you to Brad Goldberg. Brad, take it away.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Ed. Good afternoon, good morning to you guys. I'm really pleased to be here today. And we decided that I should show to you a little examples of my previous work that one could see leading up to the Pueblo Grande project. and I will do that in short order. Now my clicker is not working. There we go. And can everybody see that? Hopefully, yes. And this is in 1977. And I was interested in sculpture and landscape architecture, art and landscape. And it's funny because in 1977, I did this piece near Vienna in Austria. It is 90 feet by 90 feet, a perfect square that surrounds a existing pathway. And I think that I wanted to show it because it's very close to what I believed in then, and what I believe in now. And in some ways, I don't know that I've done any better work since then, but I've certainly tried. The next slide is just a person walking through that path and seeing how the growth take place, and it becomes more closer and closer to the landscape, and that is my objective. If you jump ahead maybe 13, 14 years, I was selected as an artist by the group Public Art St. Paul to work on a full city block in downtown St. Paul, Minnesota as an artist. And I think my landscape background helped me get this commission. And it was really a wonderful opportunity. And I'm the kind of artist that I come to the project and I'm a stone worker, and I build a lot of the projects that I design or build certain components of them. And here it is in construction, and here it is completed. There's an arena with a bandstand, a river that comes through the site. We planted over 300 new trees, and it becomes an urban forest. This is a project called Pegasus Plaza. It's in downtown Dallas, Texas, and it's based on the myth of Pegasus. And I probably spent 2 years fabricating, installing, and overseeing this project. So the projects take a long time, and they're very, very craft oriented. This is, as Ed mentioned, the Phoenix Municipal Courthouse, and we rotated the building on the site to save the Walker Building, and as a historic building, and that opened up an entrance plaza that I did something called Mesquite Bosque, and Mesquite Bosque is, as Ed said, 85 mesquite trees, thornless mesquite trees that sit on this desert floor, and unfurling are these walkways or carpets of stone that lead into the building. And some years later, now, if you look at it from the garage across the street, you'll see that it really has become a bosque or an urban forest. And it's really quite lovely because it is a place of shade. And when I first visited Phoenix, I didn't see much shade in downtown. And I think that this has been a very successful thing because of the amount of shade and how comfortable it is to be in it. And it reduces the amount of stress that people feel that they may have when they enter a building such as this. This is a piece called Foundation. It's for the new federal building in Oklahoma City. It replaces the Murrah Federal Building that was blown up in the 90s. And it is a water sculpture about 80 feet wide, 300 feet long. It starts as a spring that you can see on the left, and there's 1,000 tons of boulders. I love working with boulders, natural boulders, and the water flows at the base of the boulders, creating an auditory sound. This is in Houston. It's called Houston Waters. I went through a whole period of making vessels, and these two vessels are made of granite, and I handmade them, and the water flows over these ripples and makes a nice sound and a film of water that people like to touch. This is a project called Coral Eden. It's at the Miami International Airport in Miami, and I took small photographs, macro photographs of brain coral, and expanded it to be 30 feet wide by 90 feet tall, passing through the floor plates, all the different floors. There are 4 floors in the building, and the work passes through all 4 floors, so you can see it on different levels. And this kind of gives you a picture of it from above. It's pretty massive in scale. It's made of travertine, and I did a lot of hand carving on this project. This is a piece in the northeast of Scotland called Place of Origin. And Place of Origin is centered upon being on top of a well-known granite quarry that provided stone for many important buildings in Britain. And it's a land reclamation project that that used material from the quarry and some other surrounding quarries, and we built this hill about 500 feet long, 100 feet tall. You take a nice hike to the top of the hill and have a view of the quarry. Down below, there's a woodland, and we planted about 5,000 saplings, different trees. Here's the cairn-like structure. You climb to the top, beautiful view of the Scottish landscape, and there you see the view of 360-degree view of the landscape. And here it is today around, it's a very recent photograph, and one can see the woodland has grown up into quite a forest, and the piece has really settled in, and the quarry has become a lake. This is a place called Moore Square in Raleigh, downtown Center City, Raleigh, North Carolina. And I collaborated with a group called Sasaki Associates, and I worked together with them on all phases of the project. And it's a 200-year-old park that we brought into this century, and it's surrounded by grand oak trees, 200-plus-year-old oak trees, and a great amount of effort went to take care of the health of these trees. And the park was always referred to as the Grove. So I did a series of what we call Grove Rooms. And this is one Grove Room. It's an elliptical spiral, about 30 feet by 40 feet, completely hand carved in granite. And it gets people out of the fray of the park. And people come and sit in singles or in groups. And this is another Grove Room. It's called the Community Table. And the Community Table the table itself is 50 feet long, and garners people from very different kinds of activities, birthday parties, picnics, reunions, weddings, and here are some people playing chess and checkers. So it goes way beyond the way it looks to how it functions on an artistic level. This is a piece called Sylvan Portals. And Sylvan Portals is for a 180-acre nature preserve that's being held in perpetuity. So no design will take place inside of this 180 acres except for some footpaths. And there you see it. It's all made of granite, solid granite blocks. And there you see it across the street from some housing that's being built. And lastly, this is a piece I'm just completing right now. It's called Oasis Sombrio, a place of shade. And it's in El Paso, Texas. And it's a piece that is about 100 some odd feet long and has these granite seating elements, and it has Palo Verde trees and decomposed granite and uplighting. And it's just being finished right now. Just took these pictures just last week, and there you see this. Now, to talk about Pueblo Grande is just a wonderful experience in my life, and quite a journey. And of course, Pueblo Grande is right here. The museum itself and the archaeological site is throughout. And it was a 25-year-old dream to open up this corner where you see my cursor, to allow people to access the site from the corner of 44th and Washington. They built the 44th Street station, which you all probably know, those of you who are from the Phoenix area, and they built a walkway that crosses the canal and turns into a light rail station. And from the light rail station, you can cross the street, enter the project, and move on into the museum and archaeological site. And that was the objective of the project. The first day that I saw this project after being shortlisted is this photograph right here. And it was basically a sign that told you where the entrance was. And I walked in, and I really have to be honest, my heart just kind of sank. I looked at it and I said, oh my gosh. It was just this big, wide open space with nothing, with largely nothing in it but power lines. And you could see the collections building up the museum there. But it was really a difficult thing to see, because sometimes I just know right away what needs to happen. But in this case, I went blank, and I really was at a loss. But I started to think, and you enter then to the museum itself, and on into the inside of the museum, where there are exhibits about the Salt River and the Hohokam encampments. And the Hohokam, of course, this is a 1,500-year-old archaeological site along the canals that the Hohokam hand dug, and they create the basis of many of the canals that exist in Phoenix today. I was really taken by a lot of the exhibits inside of the museum, especially the pottery. And they created something called red on buff pottery, and beautiful decorations. And so I was very, very influenced right away about that. And it's a place of education about the Hohokam and Pueblo Grande and the whole area around the airport, which is, basically a one big archaeological site for the Hohokam. And I like this photograph because it shows three different aspects: the archaeological ruins, the museum building itself, and a bird from today. And it speaks of different time zones that I think the work needed to somehow encapsulate as well. And this is a view of the archaeological site. And we were asked to do a scheme, to do a proposal. And the proposal, we were asked, not necessarily something that we would build necessarily, but they wanted us to think big, and they wanted us to approach the whole site. And this is the very first drawing that I ever did of the Pueblo Grande project, and it led into a plan that looked like this. And it's very funny for me to look at it now, because it was pretty overblown and completely impractical, and had a lot of interesting things going with it. A big mound, earth mound. Thus, it was deemed a little bit impractical, but I got the project, and this was a scheme for the portal of the project at the corner of 44th and Washington that was made of rammed earth and to create this sort of sense of passage. But starting the project, I really knew that it was an open slate and that I had to grapple with that. And I did many false starts. This is just one of them. Just trying to get a sense of the scale and get a sense of what the route might be like between the corner and the museum. And I was having trouble. So I do what I always do when I go to a place to work is I photograph, and I go into the landscape or into the city or whatever the place might be, and I take photographs and I try to understand that place. And in this case, I took a lot of photographs of the desert and the sort of the magical aspect of light and shadow and materials, rocks and ocotillo cactus, barrow cactus, mesquite trees, how a walkway might look like that travels through a desert environment, and saguaros and ironwood trees from a project that one of our landscape architects did up in Scottsdale called Pinnacle Peak. And I took a trip not too far from to the Tonto National Forest to a place called the Hohokam Sears Cay Ruin. And I think I had a breakthrough with this photograph because it really was an encampment and it was an enclosure. And it was the idea of enclosure that I was really after. And I took away a lot from that particular day. I looked at boulders of all kind that this particular composition of boulders, it has a cave inside of it. And the cave is just completely magical. And it turns out that this was a Hohokam encampment, and you can see the Matato Imano grinding areas for corn and maybe mesquite pods for flour. And but it wasn't until I drove by this one day, and it's really changed the way I thought about everything that I was looking at. And when they build a project in Phoenix and there's a lot of saguaros, they gather them up and they corral them in a certain area. And in that corral, they let them sit for a couple of years while they build the project. And then when the project is near complete, they take them apart and they sprinkle them around the landscape. But it was something that was sculptural to me, something that was very a combination between humans and nature that created this sculptural composition that turned me on and gave me another insight into how I might proceed. And my light just really went on. And at the same time, we engaged landscape architects. And we interviewed a lot of landscape architects and selected the team of Smith Group JJR and Floor Associates. That's Rick Jones on the right and Chris Brown on the left with me. And we were created a team to see the project to fulfillment. And I felt very responsible as being the artist to lead the way and come up with a scheme. And so I had taken those things that had influenced me and I came up with this drawing. And I brought it with me to Phoenix and with a work session and rolled it out in front of them and said, this is what I'd like to do, which incorporated a portal up here that's walking through a grouping of trees into a 140-foot diameter circle of saguaro cactus and a boulder field and a performance area, and then on through some mesquite grove trees along the walkway and into the museum and onward into the archaeological site. And I got a lot of really good feedback and a lot of support for this. And we're not only working with our team, but with the state historical preservation organization and the museum people and tribal members. And there's a big cast of characters all looking at this because of its historical importance. It's on the national list of historic places. And I think it's the only place in Phoenix that's on this list. And so the site plan turned into this. And here's a detail of it. You can see the circle of saguaro and and the portal up to the left. And on the right-hand side, you see the portal, a study for the portal at that time. I felt it really important to get the scale right. And so I did a lot of these SketchUp views that studied the scale of the portal and how it might look, because there was this cacophony of catenary wires for the trains, people, cars, trucks, buses, wires everywhere. It's really quite a complex little intersection right there. And so I really felt like I had to get the scale right so that it would be iconic and it would hold its own on this site visually, so that people would notice it and they would say, well, look at that and what's in there. And I studied it from the way it looks from a car. All these things are very important to understand. And I started looking at materiality, and I took a cue from the Hohokam pottery that I had so much enjoyed, and came up with this granite look that had, it's not a copy of any kind of particular decoration, but just a sense of that combination of color. And this is a study of the portal itself, that portal itself meaning the actual entrance that one walks through, and the gates on the right, and a funny little SketchUp view of the saguaro room with the boulders and the performance area in the middle. And you can see the ubiquitous power lines there that were increasingly bothersome to me. Here's a side view that looks at the scale between the portal and the saguaro boulder field. And at that time, I learned that I could not plant anything directly on the desert floor because it might interrupt the archaeological remains below, because that area of the site had not been excavated yet. That really set me back. I really then went, oh my gosh, what do I do now? And I dug deep into my brain and came up with an idea to build it up on a mound. I had been interested in mounds before, and this is a drawing by Rick Jones, the landscape architect, on your upper left and down below. And we built the site up 3 feet in elevation to get enough distance that was deemed okay to plant trees and the saguaro. And here's a view at that time. You can sort of see the contours on the left and on the right, raising the site up above to get some planting room. And here's the site plan at that time that shows the power poles again, and we started talking about plant associations and what kind of plants might have been there 1,500 years ago. We don't know, but the kind of plants that would naturally happen in that part of Phoenix, we did know, and saguaro, cacti, and mesquite trees, ocotillo, ironwood trees, creosote, prickly pear cactus, and through a lot of talk and detailed discussions and struggling with the budget and trying to fit everything in while at the same time trying to keep it really ultra simple. Is simplicity is my goal, but simplicity in many ways is harder and more difficult than overdoing things. These contract construction drawings started to address the portal as well as the platform. And here you see a construction drawing for the portal itself, and kind of on the top of the page, being a sort of instructions for the masons on how these pieces went together, and um, drawings for the platform and something called the threshold stone. And I went to pretty far north in Phoenix to a boulder quarry and selected some 80 some odd boulders, big boulders, granite boulders from this landscape, and transported them to the site. And the mound was built and everything was ready to go. And we dug holes into the area because we knew we were on the mound, and planted the boulders so that weren't just resting on the ground, but rather they were directly growing out of the ground. And in a big flurry of activity, we planted all of these boulders. Then something absolutely magical took place. That was the question of saguaro and where were we going to get that kind of quantity of saguaro and cacti. And somebody called up the city and had a site that was abandoned that they were going to develop, and they had a bunch of saguaro cactus that they wanted to donate. And the city itself couldn't accept the donation, but the museum's auxiliary committee could. So they were accepted and they were donated. And this was the biggest gift one could ever imagine. And mature saguaro cacti. And they were all brought to the site on these special trucks that are, if you don't live in Arizona, you're fascinated with these trucks. They carry one saguaro at a time and raise them vertically and plant them in the hole. And at this time, we planted and positioned all of the somewhat 94, 95, I really can't remember, saguaro cacti. Chris Brown played a really nice role in locating and helping locate all of the saguaro cacti per the plan that I had developed. And we planted ironwood trees inside the circle. And the circle became something that was very special feeling. I dare say spiritual, um, because it had an aura to it. And this was just taking place as we were working, and it just really started to come together and really blocked out the rest of the site. The foundation for the platform was poured and the site really started to take shape. And then another absolutely wonderful thing took place, and that's Elizabeth Grajales, who really spearheaded talking to the power utility company, APS, APC, something like that, and um, succeeded in talking them into getting rid of the power poles and burying the power lines underground. And that, to me, is one of the most significant actions of the entire project. And I am forever indebted to Elizabeth for doing this, because it made all the difference between sort of this cohesive project and not being um, burdened by this visual stuff of all of those power poles that you see on the left. And at the same time, we turned our attention to the building of the portal itself. You can see the 44th Street station in the background. And here's the foundation poured on the ready for the stones to start arriving. And the stones came on big trucks and were hoisted into place by cranes. Here's one of the trucks coming in at dawn that hold some big stones for the portal, and they were put into place with a very great precision and patience and skill. We achieved about 1/8 of an inch of precision on the project. Tolerance is the word I'm looking for. And one morning, the big lintel showed up, 12 feet long, 4 feet high, 5 to 6 feet deep, weighing about 35,000 pounds. We all held our breath while it was hoisted into place, and it fit just perfectly. And I personally was very relieved. This shows you this idea of compression that I was searching for, the idea that you leave the outside world, that you compress space, and then you enter the world of the Pueblo Grande. And so you could now see that taking place with the placement of the lintel stone. And the portal started going up, and here's the threshold stone. It's the map of the Salt River and all the Hohokam constructed irrigation channels. The portal went up and was done in cast in place and wrapped in granite, big granite sheets with slabs. And at the same time, all over the site, the flurry of activity took place where people were pouring the concrete walks. And I have to say that I think that when people are really intently trying to do a great job on a project, that it's catchy. And I think that everybody else sees that, and people start to really try to do good work themselves. And the concrete work I thought was just really extraordinarily well done, and created this sinuous walkway into the museum, flanked by mesquite trees that one day will create a lot of shade on the walkways. And the gates went up, the gates being 1 inch thick steel plates that were plasma cut with this Hohokam-esque patterning, and you can see the shadows on the ground and Elizabeth watching everything going on. And we turned our attention to lighting and everything, every kind of detail we could think of. We looked at mortar and picked a color that was very neutral here in the middle on the right. And I think everything goes back to the team of people. And there are more people involved with this project than I have a slide of. But this is a core team of the landscape architects and Ruth and Elizabeth from the city and Office of Cultural Affairs. And I just think that it's people who got behind the project and really made it take place and really were committed to making it as good as it could be. And so today, now you look at the Google Earth and you can see the portal right here, and you can see the walkway and enter the circle of saguaro trees and on into the museum and into the archaeological site. There you see the portal itself, and with the gates closed, and you see the gates right there. They're really quite beautiful and well crafted. And we worked with a graphic designer who helped us with the graphics and did these steel letters on these stucco walls. And there again, you can see the 44th Street station in the background. A couple of years later, it was photographed, and we can see the creosote and the ocotillo really, growing, and the prickly pear as well. And you pass through the portal itself, and you pass by the threshold. And there's Diana, my wife and partner, who is behind the scenes doing all sorts of drawings and AutoCAD work and everything, a big part of the project. And you can see the exactitude of how the lintel fits into place as you look up in the sky. And there's a look back to the intersection so you can see how busy the intersection is. And then if you turn right around, you see how different the experience is. And you walk along the path, and you come to a stone on the right that tells the story of the Hohokam in Pueblo Grande. And you keep on walking, and you see these two cubes on the left, and you don't really know what they are, but it's the trash can and the recycle can. And I believe that if you don't capture all of these details yourself in your own mind, that and forget about doing them, that somebody's going to come along and put something there that probably you won't like. So these are some trash cans that the landscape architect Chris Brown designed, and we got constructed. And you keep on walking through the path, and you come to the performance circle, and you see the stones and the saguaro and the ironwood trees and the pathway into the museum. Looking back towards the portal, the kind of detailing on the platform, the granite platform, turned out really quite beautiful. And the whole ensemble together of all of the different elements. I like this photograph very much because if you look at the corners, the edges on the lower right and the lower left, you get the feeling of the mound and how everything is built up on a mound. And then you walk along the pathway and into the museum. You turn around when you're done in the museum, and retrace your pathway back to the portal, onto the light rail, or back wherever you came from. You can see the lighting that lights up the saguaro and boulders and walkway. And it's really a place for the performances can take place. And I don't know personally all that's taken place there. They have a big Indian market in December before Christmas, and I'd like to think that they would be using this space for dances and certain kinds of performances, and that's my hope. And then you see the portal at night with the gates closed and the lighting on it. And that's my final slide. And I really wonderful project for me. And I thank you very much for your time.
No questions have come in yet. If anyone has any, you can put them in the chat box, please. The first question is, do you sculpt stone in your studio or at the quarry?
Both. Both. It depends on scale. If I can handle the scale, I will do it in my studio. If it's beyond my scale, I work with fabricators, both in the States, Italy, China, wherever. But I've always liked working on site because there you have the greatest latitude of improvisation.
Do you ever think about animal life to come in the future for your sites?
Yes, definitely, definitely. And you see that you know you can project. The more you plant, the more you're going to get that. And I'm a big believer. I can hardly even imagine doing a project where I didn't use trees. And so the idea of plant materials and the in the desert, in the Sonoran Desert, the way the saguaros bloom and the birds go after the nectar and the prickly pear blooms, and so there's a lot of wildlife that takes place, and that's an added wonder.
And Brad, I don't if you recall, the cactus wrens moved into the saguaros as soon as they were placed. I mean, it was
Yeah,
within a week we started to see nests, which was really remarkable.
right. Yeah, it's especially considering what was there before and what's outside the portal, which is pretty hostile, and so it really did create a new ecosystem.
What was the entire timeline for the project? When did it start and end?
That's a funny question because it started and then it stopped for a while. I want to say 3 4 years, something like that. It was completed in 2016, in January of 2016. So that's about 5 years from now. It had a degree of complexity and to it, even though it looks rather simple. So it did take some time to do.
Will there be more excavations done in the future there? And would there possibly be another phase of design work done on the very open area of the site? And if so, would you be involved?
Um, I plead no to all of those questions that I don't know. Um, I don't know if there are more excavations being done or they're just leaving them in place. They've excavated quite a lot of the site, except for the areas that I showed you in the very beginning of that wide open space. And if something happened and there was an addition to it, I would jump at the chance of being involved.
Are there any other questions?
I do have a question if I could, and it's a lot of the materials you work with and surfaces you work with seem to attract the hand. And so I was wondering just how you think about touch in developing your ideas for works.
Well, I believe in the touch of the human hand. I believe that it creates a warmth and a sensual quality to it. And so I'm always looking for ways to create that. As an example, I would never try to do a piece like this portal in a polished material. So, but the scale of which sometimes doesn't make handwork appropriate. So you have to come up with ways that develop richness of texture and richness of tactile qualities, while sometimes if the scale doesn't allow you to touch it, that you can achieve that. And we did this stone work using high pressure water, and we uh, call it a diamond finishing, even though it has no diamonds involved, just a trade name. And it creates this really beautiful pocked texture to it, and looks like it's something that you know, has a lot of warmth to it.
Any more questions or thoughts for the good of all?
Can you talk more about how you hand finished the brain coral piece? Do you start with cut and then finish?
Yes, the brain coral piece was, how can I say, it was Olympic in nature. It was because of the scale and the timeline of the construction. One has, you know, when one gets involved in big projects like this, you're always at the mercy of the timeline of the construction. So, although that project took 10 years to visualize and plan, the actual carving of it and making of it took about a year or so. And we did it through tracing. I'll just be very honest how we did it. We traced the photographs that I made in AutoCAD and fed that AutoCAD material into CNC digital saws, and they cut out the pattern and kept these two of these machines going for a year. And then I took each piece because I wasn't satisfied with the texture of the machine touching it. Because if you look at brain coral, you see a lot of texture in the ventricles and such. And so I carved every single piece, a texture along the work, and spent months and months and months. I think I spent 8 months carving the textures.
Are there more questions?
Okay.
Well, thank you, Brad, and thank you everyone for joining us this morning. And as Elizabeth pointed out, next week, same time, same bat channel, we'll have Joe Willie Smith talking about his studio experience and work. And then in November, we'll have, and a little bit of early December, we'll be having workshops on law and the art. Brad, I can't thank you enough for joining us today and sharing your experience with us. It's a real pleasure.
Thank you all very much for attending.